Today, we are diving into something truly special, an ancient text called the Yoga Charabhumi Shastra. Now, this isn't just some old philosophy book. It's basically a map, a detailed guide to understanding the very nature of reality itself. So let's get into it.
You know, it's a question we all bump into, right? Life can feel so messy. It's confusing, it's unpredictable. One minute, everything's great. The next, not so much. It's full of these apparent contradictions. But what if there was a set of core principles, almost like a secret code, that could help us make sense of it all?
Well, the text gives us this key idea called Dharma Udana. The best way to think of it is like a seal of authenticity. If a teaching lines up with these core truths, it's the real deal. It's a genuine reflection of how things are. These aren't rules you have to follow. They're more like fundamental laws of physics for our existence.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the 4 seals all together. Then, we're going to break them down one by one. We'll start with impermanence, see how that logically leads to suffering, and this idea of non-self, and then explore the ultimate piece of nirvana. And to wrap it all up, we've got a really cool analogy straight from the text itself.
So, let's get to it. What is this complete map? Well, it's these 4 foundational truths, the 4 seals of Dharma. And together, they give us a pretty comprehensive way of looking at our entire existence.
So here they are, the big 4. 1. Anything that comes into being is temporary. 2. Because of that, trying to cling to those temporary things causes stress or suffering. 3. Which leads to the idea that there's no permanent fixed self anywhere to be found. And 4. There is a state beyond all this chaos, nirvana, and it is total peace. You can see how they build on each other, right? Let's dive into that first one.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute bedrock of this whole system, the law of impermanence. This is the one that everything else is built on. It describes the very terrain we're walking on.
The text puts it so simply, yet so powerfully. All conditioned things are impermanent. What that means is, well, everything. Anything that arises from causes and conditions, a thought, an emotion, a mountain, this very second, is constantly in flux.
And this idea goes way deeper than just things end eventually. It's telling us that reality isn't a collection of solid, static objects. It's more like a flowing river. Nothing is ever fixed or solid, not even for the tiniest fraction of a second.
And check this out. This is where it gets really mind-bending. The text zooms in on the tiniest sliver of time imaginable, a kshana, and finds an entire life cycle packed inside it. In every single moment, there's an arising, a brief abiding, a subtle change, and then a ceasing. This is happening constantly with everything. Whoa. Okay, so if you accept that the ground beneath our feet is constantly shifting, well, that leads us directly into the next 2 seals. They aren't just separate ideas, they are the natural, logical result of living in a world that is fundamentally impermanent.
So the text points out that because of impermanence, we run into 3 kinds of suffering, or dukkha. First, there's the obvious stuff, physical and mental pain. Then, there's the suffering of change. You know that sting you feel when a good thing ends, which it always must? And finally, there's this more subtle, pervasive background anxiety that just comes with the territory of being a temporary thing in a temporary world.
This brings us to a huge, critical question. I mean, if my thoughts are changing, my body is changing, my emotions are changing minute to minute, if everything is in flux, then where's the solid, unchanging me that's supposed to be having this experience?
And the text's answer is the 3rd seal, everything is without a self. And it breaks this down into 2 amazing parts. First, the non-self of the person. Basically, there's no little CEO sitting in your brain pulling the levers. And second, the non-self of everything else. The things we see and interact with aren't solid, independent objects either. It's all one big, interconnected, flowing process.
So, if the world is constantly changing and our experience is marked by struggle and this idea of non-self, is that it? Is it all just doom and gloom? The text says absolutely not. The final seal isn't another feature of the challenging landscape, it's the destination on the map.
And here is the 4th seal. It's a statement of profound hope. Nirvana is tranquility. It's the ultimate contrast to the constant churning and friction of our normal existence. It points to a state of deep, unshakable peace. So what is nirvana? The text says it's the state where all the causes of our suffering have just been extinguished. It's not a heaven you go to, it's a state you realize when all that grasping, pushing away, and confusion has totally ceased. It's ultimate peace. But
And this is a big but. Knowing this with your brain is one thing. Actually getting it is something else entirely.
And to explain this critical difference, the text gives us this fantastic analogy about how we understand the world. It's all about the difference between just reading the map and actually getting to where it leads.
So, the story starts with a prince who has lived his entire life cooped up inside the palace walls. He has literally never seen the outside world.
To keep him happy, his father has these incredible toy carts made for him, each one exquisitely crafted to look just like an animal. A deer, an ox, a horse, an elephant. These toys are his only frame of reference.
So, of course, the prince comes to believe that these toys are the real thing. When his father talks about how magnificent real elephants are, the prince just thinks about his little toy cart. In his mind, this conceptual knowledge is reality.
But then, one day, his father takes him outside, and for the very first time, the prince sees actual, living, breathing, noisy, magnificent animals.
And here is the whole point of the story. The toy carts? That's our intellectual idea of nirvana. We can read about it, think about it, talk about it. But the real animals, that represents direct, personal, undeniable wisdom. It's an experience so real it completely shatters your old ideas. The prince suddenly gets it and feels a little silly for ever thinking his toys were the real deal.
And that brings us right back to our map. The 4 seals show us the terrain is always changing. They explain that our suffering comes from trying to grab on to that changing terrain. They reveal that the you on this journey isn't some separate solid thing. And finally, they point to a destination, a peace that you find not by getting somewhere else, but by deeply understanding the nature of the journey itself.
So this ancient text doesn't just give us answers. It hands us a map and invites us on an adventure. It really just leaves one final big question, a question for you. Now that you've seen this map of reality, where will your journey take you?